Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to some more Warpforge content. And today's video is going to be a different one. It's got a title card that probably has some people wondering what are my thoughts on Warpforge and where it's going and how it's been. And really today I just want to put out a video that is from the heart and really talks about some of my concerns with Warpforge, takes what I think are, some negative things that have been going on, turn it into something constructive. And as always, this is my opinion, take it with a grain of salt, but I think I also am hitting on some points that I've seen throughout the community Discord. And with a little bit of time away from work, I've been able to play a lot more and really kind of contemplate what is going on with the state of Warpforge in 2025, not just as a competitive player or someone who loves playing this game, but even as a content creator and someone who really wants to see this game continue to thrive, and unfortunately has seen a lot of red flags quite recently. So without further ado, and thank you as always for sticking with me, let's talk about why I'm worried about Warpforge. So to start things off, I want to start on two really important points. But the first thing I want to share is what is my sort of thesis statement for this video. And I had even talked about this with some other content creators as well. And I think the most important thing I want as the through line for this entire video is with more monetization should come a better product. It is understandable and needed for Warpforge to have different systems that allow for them to make more money from players. But the product also has to reflect that. And so to use a quick example, now that I can't spend $50 on a premium campaign on a release plus 30 packs, and if I want something similar to that experience, I'm paying $100 for it, then if I'm paying another $50 to get what is now potentially the new release standard, then I should be getting something worth that money, right? And my argument is that there's been more and more monetization, especially with the release of Emperor's Children, and there's been less and less quality with the product. And so that tells me something is very, very wrong. But before we even dive into all of the different points I want to hit on today, which are a culmination of kind of my thoughts, my concerns, having played this game for over 2 years since the first demos came out, and we are closing in on the year anniversary of the release this October, a few months away. I do want to read something to you all that was shared with me when I started as a part of the content creator program and received a really wonderful package back in last December. So as you might see, I have this little Warpforge postcard, and handwritten I got a letter from the Everguild team, as I think many creators did. And so I wanted to share that with you all today, just to bring that hope and that appreciation and how grateful I am for things like this and why I would make videos critiquing it because of how much I want to see it succeed. Today, we etch our names in the stars, Leontis. To the esteemed remembrancers of the Imperium, in the far future where calamity assails at the turn of every corner, few can bear the burden of capturing the unending struggles of the galaxy. Remembrance of past times shines a bright light, signaling a path forward that eludes the faults of yesterday. Know that your efforts have not gone unnoticed. By sharing your virtue and spreading the tales of blade and bolter, of might and zeal, of courage and triumph, you have honored the warriors that bring Warhammer 40,000 Warpforged to life. As a token of our gratitude, find in this package a new panoply to don as you face the trials and tribulations of the everyday. May it protect you as you continue your righteous work, and may the Emperor guide your hand when you next enter the Forge. In eternal appreciation, the Everguild team. Alright, there's a lot to cover here, and I'm definitely going to keep this as abbreviated as possible, so as per usual, I'll see you in the comments. Please share what you think of all of the stuff we talk about today. The Battle Pass. The Battle Pass rolled out with the Orcs, sub-faction expansion, and at first I was excited, wanted to get into it, and was really hoping for the best with all of it. But as we've gotten the second round of it, and as I've kind of evaluated how I feel about the Battle Pass and the Vault, there are a lot of issues, and I think the main issue that really scares me is having cards locked in the Battle Pass and in the vault, right? And so when the new product comes out, and even as a content creator, if I have to pay $30 to $50 to access even some of the base, warlords for that faction, some of the legendaries, and I have to grind to get all of that and whatnot, it just means that I can't even really play with all of the new cards, right? And suffice it to say, for anyone who just cannot afford to put any money into the game currently, they're going to have a very restricted experience for an entire month with a new release, right? With new releases, there should come that excitement of opening packs, hoping to hit different things, right? Like creating those decks, testing decks, and really diving into the new faction. Unfortunately, with the fact that things are locked away in the Battle Pass, and including things like just trying one of the new warlords for an entire month, it just means that the release is just far less exciting and far less enriching for the average player. Now, I don't have any issue with people spending money. We need people to spend money on this game. I have spent money on this game. But it's coming to a point where, other than a premium campaign, I don't feel comfortable investing money in this product. And that's just my opinion, right? And I think there's a difference between monetizing skins and, extra packs, and, other things that basically are like, if you want to spend more, you get more. But the fact that just base cards are not able to be played with unless you pay for an entire month, I don't think that that is healthy for the longevity of the game. I think you want people to be excited to open things, and sure, you have access to most of the cards, but the fact that you cannot access an entire warlord, an entire legendary, different epics, different rares, because you don't have the Battle Pass or because you got unlucky in the vault, and trust me, we'll get into all of that, I do think that in the long run will lose players. And it will feel like the only way to play the game is to pay for the game. And I don't think that's what maybe the intention has been in the past, or it's not what we've seen before. I could open those 30 packs on release day and be excited and know I probably wouldn't get everything, right? But knowing that I had the chance to get anything. And now that has changed, and I think that's something worth taking stock of. And I think that I would really encourage that just that the Battle Pass be reworked. Maybe add more packs, add more vault tickets. That's all cool for me. But locking warlords, locking legendaries, locking rares and epics in there, I don't think is the way to go. Now, with the EC faction release, it's no secret, and I did appreciate the communication about the voice lines not being there, right? Sort of, it was just Lucius who was talking to you when you were playing. And it's clear that for the Skulls event, and I say this in good faith, I'm sure things might have been rushed, might have, needed to produce the content before things were in place. But we're now going on fully almost a month after everything is rolled out. We still don't have voice lines. And maybe that's a licensing issue. I don't know. I really do want to give the benefit of the doubt. But it's so clear, not just with the voice lines, but with the bugs that have persisted even after we had a balance patch, which you would hope would address some of those bugs after a couple weeks of seeing them, that the quality of this faction release is a clear red flag. It is really a problem when you can't play the card, like you can't expect the cards to act the way that they're supposed to because of bugs, that they don't have voice lines. Like it's clear that there's been a huge focus on monetization, but the quality of the product has shifted, right? And we'll talk about the design and we'll get into all of that. And I think there's some great, flowers that I can give AG for, and certainly the devs for what they're doing. But I think it's fair to say that there are many concerns about the Battle Pass and like how things are being monetized. And then there's also just concerns about, we had a faction release with no voice lines and a litany of bugs, right? That's just going to make this game feel more kind of money focused and less quality focused, even when designs can be very cool and very interesting. So that's what I got to say about the Battle Pass and the overall faction release. All right, the vault. Look, all I can say is I don't love this. I've never loved gacha things. And there were points where the vault was not transparent at all. Again, because the sort of quality of this content was rushed. So I think there were at least 2 weeks where we didn't even know what was in the vault, if I'm not mistaken. Definitely correct me below. Takes 11 tickets to guarantee that you're going to get something special. Generally, you're going to get the titles and avatars before you get things like the legendary that was locked in the vault, or the legendary wildcard that is here for the last couple of days. Just everything about this, I think, is an issue, right? And people are paying money for tickets to roll into the vault, which is just definitely the worst investment. Again, people are allowed to spend their money how they do. But the fact that there are cards locked in here that I cannot access as a content creator or someone who's passionate about the game without having to gamble seems like a bad deal for numerous reasons. I'm sure the vault is going to be here to stay. I'm not here naively thinking that this is going to go away. People are going to spend money. It's going to make money for them, and that's good for them. But again, could it be cool, just cool card backs and cool avatars? Could it be maybe even alt arts of something, right? I don't know. But when you put just the fundamental new cards that people just want to get their hands on and play behind another paywall that is just gambling, again, that's going to drive players away. It's going to feel money hungry, and it's going to really impact all of the momentum that should be there for a new faction release. So that's what I have to say about the vault. I think it's been received pretty poorly by the community. I feel like that's fair to say, and I do think that this is something that they should really address, as the odds feel very not in our favor. I have heard stories where people do get the legendary on the first try, but I think that's the outlier, should we say. So those are my thoughts on the vault. To get into kind of this next portion of the video, and talk about things that have just been in the game but have just sat there, right? And so again, if I'm paying money for Warpforge, if I'm getting into this game, if I'm going through all the campaigns and investing my time and effort, then I would like for alliances to not be forgotten, right? We've had 2 events for this since they were released, I think, somewhere around last fall, if I'm not mistaken. And that's it, right? I mean, I love having my team, the Collegium Magistrorum. I love talking to my team, sharing decks and things like that, and that's all well and good. Also, I think maybe we could expand alliances to maybe 30 players. I think that would be kind of nice. A lot of systems tend to have that many. But again, it's just like this was supposed to be like a reason to get into the game, right? When alliances were announced, we were all like, what does that mean exactly? Okay, it's going to be like lodges from HHL, but how are they going to run it? And really, we just still don't know, right? We've had 2 events where you could do these hyper drafts and get a bunch of rewards if you've got the Blackstones, and there's already been issues with that. But it just feels forgotten. It just feels like this is a system that was put out there and maybe had some really good intentions behind it, but the priority has shifted to other monetization, other content, and it just sort of feels like this has become an afterthought, when I think there's a lot of potential here. To draw players, to help them get onboarded into the game, to have other players as resources, and have other opportunities because they're a part of an alliance. I've actually seen more players not a part of alliances in recent laddering, and I really feel like that's because why be in an alliance? There isn't really any functional gain from it other than the camaraderie between the community and the players that are a part of it. To die on a hill that I've been dying on for a very long time, the card shop needs updating. 8 cards, 1 rare, 1 epic, 1 legendary, 1 epic, 2 rares, and 4 con. It's just not enough. We have 13 factions now. I feel like I'm losing count already. This is just not going to help the average player, right? And what it is exciting when you see a legendary in the shop, and we used to have that channel, right? That was like shop discussion. I guess people maybe still contribute to that on the Discord. I'm not sure. This feels outdated, right? It's not enough options. It's not really helping onboard new players. In HHL, there are 2 different shops, although one is not paywalled, right? You have to log in, I think, 7 days in a row to access the veteran shop, or you could buy like something, and that sort of puts you in there. But I agree. I like the idea that there's like a beginner shop and a veteran shop, and I just think that this just is so inconsequential at this point in this game. I just don't think people really care about the card shop, and it should be a way to help new players and also keep players. And I just think that it's not having the impact that maybe on, beta release that it had, right? There were 6 factions, not 12 or 13. It's not really functioning at this point. And I've sent emails about this. I've never gotten a reply. And I just think, again, like the quality of the product is not reflected, in the money or sort of the time and effort that I feel that I'm spending playing this game. By the way, I've spent over 1,000 hours playing this game over the last 2 years. And so obviously I love it a lot. But the card shop is at this point kind of an afterthought, just like Alliances, I feel. And it's a great place that if you improved, if there was possibility for that, players I think would notice almost immediately. And that's kind of my best argument for updating this card shop. Another hill that I've kind of died on multiple times is the daily missions and chest issues. With all the addition of the factions and the fact that we do have immediately new daily missions for new factions, which I actually was surprised by. I thought it might take a little bit more time. Now things are getting so hyper specific. Yes, you can use practice decks to do them, right? But again, at the end of the day, why are we trying to make it harder for newer or players that have smaller collections to functionally play the game, right? Or to play the game in a way that suits them? I think the daily mission, they all need to be, there needs to be much more homogenization. I think the faction specific thing is kind of a thing in the past. The more factions we get, the more different expansions we get, the more convoluted and just bloated this daily mission system is going to become. So I really think they should just take a little bit of time, whether it's during the summer now or whenever, and just like get this back into shape where maybe it's not faction specific, or maybe even if it is faction specific, it's something that I don't know, just feels more accessible. I'm sure a lot of other people have great ideas about this. And then for the chest, right? For grinding out 30 missions, right? So that's at least 6 missions over 5 days. You're getting an epic, and I think it's 2 army packs. That's just nothing. The army packs now, you get 5 cards, and there are 12 factions, right? That the math isn't mathing, right? So just the chest collection, especially for free-to-play players, and again, it's the people who are going to spend money are going to spend money, right? But you want to get players who would not consider spending money to open their wallets. The chest, right, is not going to encourage a free-to-play player who then maybe is thinking about spending money for the Gene Steelers because that's their favorite tabletop faction, right? Because they're not even really incentivized to grind the game each day. I think that the weekly chest, whether it gives a legendary, honestly, I think what they should do, if they don't want to give a legendary each week, which I really don't think is that crazy with how many cards are in the game now, then give more packs. Like give like 10 all army packs, right? That's still not going to come close to scratching the surface. But again, it's like these systems that have been here since release, since beta, right? Or since alpha, they're just so outdated, right? Like all of this stuff feels anachronistic. It feels just kind of from, the beginning times of Warpforge. And there's been so many great strides that have been taken. I think like the rank system was the thing that like allowed for this game to stay on the map. There have been some wonderful system changes. We're missing, a really important target audience when we don't help newer players get onboarded and maintain their interest in the game, when we have very greedy grinding mechanics or daily missions or just anything that allows for players to kind of get into the game that have just kind of been left to the wayside since release. So again, that's really what I'm trying to say here is people who are going to spend money will continue to spend money. We need to get at the players who don't necessarily want to spend money, but are like, you know what, actually I'm building my collection. I actually can spend $10 here, $20 here, because I have enough incentive and enough motivation that I'm actually making progress with my collection. As we move into the last portion here, I really just kind of want to sum up some of the points we've talked about and really look to the future, right? And so this is the last roadmap we got. And it's kind of like in a hidden post, right? There wasn't even really an article about it. There's been no mention since. We have no roadmap now. And for anyone who's done content creation for up and coming CCGs and things like that, would you stop getting a heads up or any communication about upcoming releases? That is also a red flag, because now the sort of focus becomes on how to keep the game making enough money and not so much about keeping the hype in the community alive, right? So, again, maybe they haven't gotten around to this, right? Again, I don't want to sound like I'm just putting blame upon blame upon blame. I'm sure there are reasons for all of this. I believe that fundamentally about human beings. There's always a reason. But it's just a signal when we don't have things to even necessarily look forward to or have an indication that things are being planned, right? And I'll stop here for a second and share a story of a card game that I worked with for DC Dual Force, which I thought was a really cool design and had a lot of potential. And we spoke directly with the devs in that game. And when that game was shut down, the dev team had created 4 different expansions they were ready to roll out, and we didn't see a single one. And they couldn't communicate about any of it because the game was on its last legs. That does not mean Warpforge is in the same place. But I am telling you, when the planning stops or the communications, starts to wind down, even if there are plans in the works, right? It brings some anxiety for me as a content creator. So I really think this might be the easiest thing I think for EG to do. Is just like, even if you don't have, okay, this is what's going to happen in June, July, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think they've ever done that. They've always kind of done it by quarters. All right, we've had EC out for almost a month. I'm hoping we'll start seeing teasers for something else, but we don't know. And I just think the content and sort of the rollout of the content and what would come next has just been slower and slower this year, and that is a concern for all of us. There's so much that can be said here, but I'm just going to sum up my argument around balance and sort of the state of the game into kind of these 2 points. There have been a lot of really harsh nerfs and also some good and great buffs. I think this kind of started around when we finally got buffs for Necrons, we got buffs for Tau, and then most recently we got buffs for Ultramarines, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And a lot of those basically put those factions back on the map. I don't think they were necessarily always going to be tier 1 factions, but you absolutely could crack 3K, maybe even 3.5K with those factions after they really took a look at them and put some really nice buffs in. On the other side of the coin, I think we've seen almost a direct and pretty noticeable nerf to every single new release we've had this year. If I'm not mistaken, even going back to Gene Stealers, Laska got nerfed into the ground. Now, I didn't like playing against Laska when she was good. I'll be the first one to say that was a really unpleasant experience. But the fact that the Warlord is just veritably unplayable at this point, that's an issue. Right, we saw a nerf to Mazrog as well. We saw a nerf to Lucius, which I do agree with. I think Lucius was coming out the gate real strong. Sorry, as you guys all hear the sounds of New York City here. Those sirens are going after all the harsh nerfs. I just think that it's very clear that now releases have centered on, very, very powerful things happening, and then immediately they get nerfed, right? Which makes it so why would I spend money on a battle pass to get a certain warlord, or on a certain deal to get Lucius, or invest whatever into a particular warlord that we know is strong when we know that it's going to be immediately nerfed the next patch? Again, there's just, we've seen some hot fixes. That's been great. I think we needed those. There was like basically an infinite combo, right, with Lucius and the potion creating guy. That was great. That was a heads up thing. I'm glad we saw that. And then again, I'm glad we've seen some really good buffs to factions that have been wholly irrelevant for months on end. And I know that the balance with this game is just going to get harder and harder as the factions get more cards, as there are more factions. But I think, to sum things up, I think the buffs have generally been a good thing for the competitive meta and for the non-competitive people who just want to sort of win some games and play their favorite faction. But the nerfs have been decidedly very harsh. And I think that is also going to hurt the game. And so, again, I would put the emphasis on buffing things rather than nerfing things. But if you're going to nerf things, again, it's just like, think about how that's going to make people feel who have been so excited about something new. And that's kind of where I want to leave this for now. And so, as a little bit of a continuation of thinking about like balance and release of new factions, I think we've seen some really great concepts for new cards, new card types, new mechanics, right? From the orcs, we really saw clear and like understandable support for beasts, the new card type, going wide with Gaz, which became very problematic, and with sort of like the typical, Mazrog Gordrang beatdown, right? It felt like those were getting filled out, that there were cards that were added for that, and that you could really function on playing all of those archetypes. Now, what's been an issue is all of those archetypes have been nerfed. And so we're sort of like taking 2 steps forward and then like 3 steps back. So the design is there, the intention's there, and then whether because of the balancing or, just community outcry or whatever it kind of tends to be, then it's sort of like, okay, well, actually none of these things are functioning that well. Or one of these is only functioning well, which was Gaskell go wide for the last season. And even now, I think it's still pretty viable. So again, it's sort of like to say that there are clearly positive things going on, but then we're kind of taking those things and backtracking. With EC's release, I think demons look really cool, but I just don't think have the right amount of support, at least not currently. Stimulation, buffing things, having synergies with stratagems, that's a very clear and interesting thing. Cruelty as well, you can see how it can go crazy, but also needs setup. Like, I think a lot of these concepts and the design space is great. Like, I think we are moving forward in terms of like complexity and nuance and interesting things, right? Like, I think Gene Stealers was probably one of the most complex and interesting factions. But to use them as an example, now Safa is really the only viable warlord, right? Because she's the queen of consistency. The whole faction kind of revolves around combo pieces in terms of their viability now. And so she's the only one that really you want to play out of those different warlords. And so those, when there's one warlord out of 4 that's functioning, that's just not great for how much time and effort has been put into design. And so now with EC, Lucius is still like fine. I think actually the Demon Warlord is seeing a little bit more play. And then, the beginning Warlord is definitely a little bit more viable, but just the faction as a whole has some pretty huge gaps in its early game potential and its ability to snowball after some of the nerfs as well. So this kind of is like a continuation of thinking about like the card design, the releases, and then also the balance changes that end up coming afterward, which pretty much every new release we've seen for the last, 6 to 8 months, we've seen like almost an immediate reaction with harsh nerfs. And then, like I said, some good buffs for other factions. Wouldn't be a long-term video without talking about kind of the state of the ranked season. Aside from a few outliers, and I do think Ultramarines are now, have potentially multiple tier 1 decks or tier 1.5 decks. I think that You know, the low end has been 3.3k for some factions, which I think is like Chaos is one of the lower ones. And then upwards, you know, of 4k for some of the other factions. But aside from a couple outliers, it feels like a lot of factions have at least one, maybe two competitive builds. That's better than it's been previously, and I think that's largely due to a lot of the buffs that have come. And so I think the state of ranked at some points has been quite healthy. However, it has felt for quite a while that there's kind of one very, very explosively good deck for certain seasons. We saw it with Sisters of Battle. Most recently, we saw it with Ghazghkull. I do think that's more of kind of like a balancing issue at times. I think that's more of, you know, the new reinforcement, the new faction coming in and just out-muscling everything else that's older, which I think can be reined in. But this is kind of like, I would say, a more positive point for the state of the game. It does feel like there's at least one deck for each faction that can compete at a pretty high level, especially if you really know your matchups, if you really know the game. And I think that does keep players like myself who play fairly religiously on the ranked ladder interested, right? And I actually have tried 5 or 6 different factions with 1 or 2 decks for each faction this season for the last week and a half, and have found a reasonable amount of success. Now, I'm sure other people may disagree. I think when we get into ranked discussions, there's just a lot of, you know, kind of misinformation that gets thrown around there. But to me, I think the ranked system and the ranked ladder system overall, minus I think some issues with botting and other stuff like that, has largely taken a step forward. And I hope that we continue to see that for ranked and the entire kind of ranked system. Again, thank you for sticking with me. If you've been here this whole video, let's talk about some key takeaways and some closing thoughts. So number one, Battle Pass lock cards I think are just not good for this game. An unfinished release obviously brings up some concern, and having, you know, sort of bad deals on, like, you know, spending a bunch of crystals on vault tickets, you know, only having vault tickets plus titles as like a $10 to $20 deal. It all feels not good for the longevity of the game, and that's kind of some of my early criticisms. Same thing here, right? Number 2, with the vault needs transparency, obviously, and some sort of reconstructing. Again, locked cards in there doesn't feel good for the average player, especially for new players. Unless they're willing to spend money. Again, like, you can capture that demographic, but you're missing out on the demographic that's like, oh, I play card games. I saw LongTim is playing this Warpforge game. Let me check it out. Oh, I can't even really play the new cards because they're locked in the vault or locked in the Battle Pass. Again, offer more packs, more tickets, more, right? But taking away cards that can be accessed, making, you know, starter decks go behind premium walls. And I know, yes, they added more stuff to the nodes and blah, blah, blah. But, like, taking away value that was already there and then replacing it with something that is very clearly, strictly worse, I don't think is a good sign for the game and a good direction. And I really hope we can change course. And then third point here, as we move on to some of these last points, alliance events. Can we have some? Could we maybe get a couple each year? I don't know. Could we get different kinds of them? I don't know how much coding goes into that or how much prep goes into that. Again, right? And so I'll throw my hands up on that one. But can we do something with alliances? It feels like just very meaningless. And I think it was supposed to be kind of a point of hype and interest for the game that has really lost its zeal. The last key takeaways here, again, right? Card shop improvements for number 4, number 5, mission and chest improvements, and number 6, which I think is a lot more complex around balancing the game. But I think the kind of thesis for me here is less harsh nerfs, right? Don't make people regret spending money on your product. Continued hotfixes is a very, very good thing for the community. That is one of the best things they can be doing. And continued buffs. I really think, although, you know, maybe this season with Ultramarines, the buffs were a little bit overtuned, and I'm definitely willing to say that. Generally, it's felt like, okay, we are actually putting, a faction on the map that just has sat there for months and months and months. There are seasons where I just will not touch particular factions, right? And the more we can reduce that, and I really think they have, the better and healthier and more fun this game is going to feel. Final thoughts here, and thanks so much for giving this video the time and attention that you are. We want to see roadmaps. I want to see roadmaps. Speak for myself here. I want to see improved communication. If we're taking away things from the game and moving things around, I would like to see a post about it. I'd like to see a little news article. We don't even have the card gallery for EC, and it's been almost a month. Like, again, improved communication, improved sort of, transparency, better quality releases. And all of this, I believe, can preserve this game, right? I'm not saying that we are in sort of like a free fall where, like, who knows what's gonna happen. And there were moments where I was like, I really hope these faction rollouts keep this game going, and that we could see multiple rollouts. And we've seen a lot of improvement, as well as challenges in the last year since the official release, and certainly a lot of changes since beta and alpha. But I just think that, however the shift has happened towards more monetizing and lower quality, here is I'm calling it out, right? And so to call us in, right, to call the community in is to say, I think we need to continue to voice this. I think we shouldn't be paying for lower quality things. But obviously I can only vote with my own wallet. And I just think that this should be taken to heart, that I know things can't be perfect all the time. I know releases are not going to always be on time or in the way that they need to be. I'm sure there are other powers that be that influence how this game, gets new content or gets new systems or, changes price modeling or whatever, right? And I understand that that's a bit above me, but I think we're losing the important thing about this game, which was always the quality, the voice acting with voice lines, the mechanics, the lore that's sort of infused into the card design, right? Like, all of those things should still be here, and I think a lot of those things have taken a hit. At the end of the day, I think there's a lot of hope for improvement, and I really hope that this video outlines how that improvement can come to fruition, and I'm really interested to hear all of your thoughts in the comments. And then we'll get back to quite a lot of other content for Warpforge and potentially other games as well. And as always, thank you for being here, and I'll catch you guys next time.